Greetings to all Africans and the African diaspora joining us from every corner of the world. Today you are watching United States of Africa TV, the platform dedicated to truth, sovereignty, and the unity of African people everywhere. Today we bring you a powerful analysis of the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States, a situation that continues to evolve and reveal deeper realities about global power. As this conflict unfolds, many observers around the world are beginning to see the limits of a power that was once presented as unstoppable. For Africans, this moment carries important lessons. One of the most striking developments has been a recent call by Donald Trump for international military support, and this appeal should encourage every African to reflect seriously on our own situation. One of Africa's greatest weaknesses has long been hesitation when it comes to unity. When we say we refer not only to ordinary citizens but also to many of the leaders governing African nations. Too often, African leadership fears what can be described as paper tigers, imperial powers that appear invincible on the surface. Yet the current global situation is revealing that their strength is not always as absolute as it once seemed. Yes, powerful nations possess the ability to cause harm, they have advanced weapons and enormous resources. But much of the aura surrounding that strength is built on perception as much as reality. There is no fundamental reason why African nations with their vast population and natural wealth could not develop comparable capabilities if they chose to invest in that direction. Few people around the world would have believed that within less than 2 weeks of intense conflict, the United States would begin appealing to other nations for support. Initially, Trump made a call that received little attention, reaching out to countries capable of backing his military campaign against Iran. The reported plan involved launching strikes designed to weaken Iran's leadership structure, not necessarily to dismantle the entire political system, but to replace key figures with individuals more cooperative with Western interests. Iran's resistance and lessons in governance. Some analysts compared this approach to previous strategies attempted in countries like Venezuela, where external pressure was applied in the hope of reshaping political leadership. However, Iran represents a very different case. Its leadership structure appears far more determined and resistant. Some observers suggest that the supreme leader had previously restrained certain military ambitions and prevented a wider confrontation, but today, the United States faces leaders who appear fully prepared for prolonged conflict. This situation highlights a critical lesson for many African nations. In numerous African countries, political systems are often built around a single individual. When that individual is removed, whether through external pressure, an internal coup, or the actions of a trusted associate, the entire structure collapses. A truly stable political system should never depend entirely on one person. Institutions must be strong enough to survive leadership transitions without the nation falling into instability. Trump's call for assistance also triggered responses from other global leaders. Ukraine's President Zelensky, for example, offered support for the campaign. Yet shortly afterward, Ukraine itself experienced a massive wave of attacks involving hundreds of drones and missiles, forcing Zelensky to urgently seek assistance from his own allies. Meanwhile, Trump has renewed his international appeal, this time asking countries affected by disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz to contribute naval forces and equipment to reopen the strategic waterway. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most vital shipping lanes in the world, responsible for a significant share of global oil transportation. Without the cooperation of multiple nations, the situation there could worsen considerably and potentially destabilize global energy markets. Countries that have backed Trump and Israeli leadership are now feeling the pressure. Some European governments are beginning to reconsider their involvement. French President Emmanuel Macron initially indicated that France might participate in operations to reopen the strait. However, after reports emerged that the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle faced potential risks, and after Iran warned that French territory could become a legitimate target if France became directly involved, Macron adopted a noticeably more cautious tone. Spain has declined involvement outright, and Italy has begun distancing itself from direct participation as well. Reports have also indicated that some French forces engaged in the region have suffered injuries. Sovereignty, imperialism, and Africa's path. European governments often justify their involvement in distant conflicts by claiming strategic interests in the region. But this raises a fundamental question: on what basis can a country claim strategic interests inside the territory of another sovereign nation? Too many observers. Such actions resemble a continuation of imperialism. The Strait of Hormuz lies geographically between Iran and Oman. It does not belong to France or any European country, yet foreign powers continue attempting to intervene without invitation. These dynamics reflect a broader global system in which powerful nations support one another to maintain collective influence and dominance. This is precisely why Trump's call for assistance should capture the attention of every African. We are witnessing a moment where the United States, despite possessing one of the most powerful militaries in history, has encountered significant resistance from a country that has lived under severe sanctions and economic pressure for decades. Rather than relying on expensive Western military hardware such as F-16 or F-35 fighter jets, Iran focused on developing its own technologies and asymmetric strategies. There are vital lessons here for Africa. Colonial domination did not truly end when many African countries gained formal independence. In many ways, the struggle for genuine sovereignty continues. Today, foreign influence remains deeply embedded in parts of the continent, and some African leaders still maintain strong political and economic dependency on external powers. It is not uncommon for certain leaders to travel frequently to European capitals to seek approval or guidance on major national decisions. Such patterns raise serious questions about the true meaning of sovereignty. If African nations stood together with a unified voice, foreign powers would have far less ability to interfere in the continent's affairs. The perceived strength of some global powers is partly sustained by Africa's internal divisions. If African countries collectively declared that they would no longer accept external domination or interference, the global balance of power could change dramatically. Iran's experience offers one example of how strategic coordination and regional alliances can strengthen a nation's ability to resist sustained pressure. Through networks and partnerships across several countries, Iran has built systems that allow it to withstand enormous external challenges. Africa, unfortunately, often remains fragmented even when a few nations attempt to challenge foreign control. Yet the continent possesses extraordinary advantages that, if harnessed collectively, could be transformative. Resources, technology, and the vision of unity. Africa holds vast natural resources, land, minerals, energy reserves, and immense agricultural potential. Iran, despite having fewer natural advantages in many areas, has managed to develop sophisticated drone and missile technology through deliberate, sustained investment in science and engineering. Africa could follow a similar path by strengthening educational systems and investing heavily in scientific and technical training. African countries could develop advanced industries, including technological and defense manufacturing capabilities. Much of the global narrative about power rankings is shaped by perception rather than objective reality. Countries that appear dominant on paper sometimes face serious limitations when confronted with determined, organized resistance. For Africa, the true obstacle is not a lack of resources. The real challenge is unity and the political will to exercise genuine independence. Debates about democracy and governance are often weaponized within international politics as instruments of influence and control. Meanwhile, the deeper struggle almost always revolves around control of resources and economic power. The example of Niger's uranium demonstrates this clearly. For decades, the country's natural wealth benefited foreign powers far more than the people of Niger themselves. When political changes disrupted those arrangements, external pressure followed swiftly. If African countries had responded collectively to such pressure, the balance of power could have shifted significantly. Past leaders such as Muammar Gaddafi attempted to challenge these global imbalances. Although his political decisions and alliances were controversial, his efforts reflected a broader desire to establish greater African independence. His experience also revealed the dangers of relying too heavily on powerful external partners, a lesson that remains relevant today. Today, many ordinary Africans share the dream of unity and genuine sovereignty. However, political leadership across the continent often remains divided. Ultimately, the key question for Africa is not simply which political system carries the label democratic or authoritarian. The deeper question is, what policies truly serve Africa's long-term interests and the well-being of its people? Trump's call for assistance in this conflict demonstrates that even the most powerful nations encounter limits to their influence when they face a determined adversary. If a country like Iran can resist enormous global pressure despite decades of sanctions and isolation, then a united Africa with its vast population, rich resources, and deep cultural heritage could also assert itself powerfully on the global stage. But achieving that vision requires serious preparation, sustained cooperation, and major investment in local industries, including technology and defense manufacturing. Africa must learn to produce more of what it needs domestically, rather than depending heavily on foreign suppliers for critical goods and technologies. In today's world, technological capability and industrial strength play decisive roles in determining political power and national sovereignty. People of Africa, we thank you for joining us today. Remember, together we can go very far. Alone, we may move quickly, but we cannot travel great distances. Unity is what allows nations and civilizations to build lasting strength. We encourage every viewer across Africa and the diaspora to join this movement for African unity. Invite your friends, family, and colleagues to watch United States of Africa TV. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share this broadcast across all your platforms. WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, and every social media network, so that together we can build a stronger, more informed African community. Your voice matters, and your participation helps spread awareness across the continent and the diaspora.